This is just absolutely pure evil.
All I heard was the gunshots, and then when we went outside and the police cleared us for us to go outside, I see dead bodies on the floor.
Then we heard gunshots. We heard him going up and down the hallway, and he shot in my door.
Another horrific day, a detestable day. I'm absolutely sick to my stomach to see children who go to school armed with backpacks and pencils lose their lives.
No parent should ever have to send their kids to school and have them not return.
You start texting your family I love you, because you never know if you get shot or killed right there and then.
It is Thursday, February 15th. The Fox News alert. High school bloodbath. Breaking overnight, the bomb squad storming a mobile home park tied to the Florida teen who went on a deadly rampage inside his former high school.
The gunman, now identified as Nicholas Cruz, a 19-year-old wearing a gas mask, armed with an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle and also with smoke grenades. He would end up killing at least 17 people.
We are live with the latest on the investigation as police dig into his chilling social media posts in search of a motive. Fox and Friends First continues right now.
All right, and good morning to you. You are watching Fox and Friends First on this Thursday morning. I'm Rob Schmidt.
And I'm Jillian Mealy. We thank you for starting your day with us. Unfortunately, on this sad note, this all started around 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon. More than a dozen people murdered in cold blood at a Florida high school. And now we're learning more about the gunman's past and possible warning signs.
Yeah, and there's so much to get to here. We do have a team of reporters on this today, including one that's outside the school who we're going to get to here in just a moment. But just to recap some of the information, 17 people killed, a number of people wounded. This is a suburb of the Fort Lauderdale area in Broward County. And just to the west, we understand this is a very affluent neighborhood where people come to raise a family, a safe neighborhood where you can trust that your kids are going to go to school and come back home safe. This was a large high school in a very big school district, a school that held about 3,000 people, as you see students here running out, trying to run for their lives from a man armed with an AR-15, a former student at that school who was expelled from that school for reasons we don't yet know at this time.
And we have gotten new information overnight, including the fact that a mobile park was swarmed overnight. Neighbors in that area say that there was some kind of explosive. We're waiting more information from police on that, but that mobile home park is located about 30 minutes away from the school. That's our understanding of that situation. Again, that is developing. That is information that we are learning in the overnight hours.
We understand that the gunman's adopted mother had died just last year. He was living with another family that I believe happened to live close to that school or was in the area of that school. And again, this was somebody who had been expelled from that school, a former student. He had been in some type of training, trying to get into the military. People that went to the school described him as a big lover of guns, as a loner, as somebody that had somewhat of a bizarre personality, somebody that kind of stuck to himself.
Right, and you're even seeing it on our screen right there, that quote. That's how kids at the school describe him, as that weird kid at school. You heard interviews from a lot of the students yesterday, a lot of his former classmates who said, we weren't surprised when we found out it was him.
Yeah.
So sadly, it begs the question, how do you go and stop something like this if kids knew that this was the guy?
Exactly. There were so many warning signs. Let's go to Marianne Rafferty, who's live this morning with more on this story, a story and an event that police have described as pure evil. Marianne.
Good morning, Rob and Jillian. Students are now reliving the terrifying account of the carnage inside that high school in Parkland, Florida. Classmates holding hands, running through the bloody hallways to escape the violence, not knowing which way was safety.
Oh my God!
It was the end of the school day, just 15 minutes before students were to be let out, but instead of yellow school buses, police cars and ambulances filling the parking lots.
We all lined up one by one, walked out. We had to run as far as we can, and we all had to stay calm. It was really hard watching everyone. People were crying. There was a lot of blood everywhere. Leaving the hallway, looking on the floor, seeing blood, and just like kids.
I tried not to look, but there was blood and gunpowder and bodies just all over the place. Like, we were stepping over puddles of blood and just trying not to look.
And as terror played out, a football coach putting his own life on the line to protect his students. 37-year-old Aaron Feist reportedly now fighting for his life after jumping in front of the gunman's bullets. Feist graduating from Douglas in 1999, where he went on to spend his entire career, first working as a security guard before becoming the assistant football coach. The deadly rampage also hitting close to home for Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel, his 3 sons, once former students at the school.
I'm absolutely sick to my stomach to see children who go to school armed with backpacks and pencils lose their lives. My triplets graduated from this very school where we had a deputy sheriff whose son was shot tonight, shot in the arm.
Attorney General Pam Bondi says the state will cover the funeral and counseling expenses for all the victims and their families. She also says the state teamed up with GoFundMe and is monitoring people claiming to represent the victims' families. Rob, Jillian?
It's such a tragic situation, and at this point there are still families who are waiting to hear about their children. So it is something that we're going to continue to follow. Marianne, thank you very much.
All right, an outpouring of support from the White House as families mourn the loss of loved ones, and as we said, some still don't know. And at the same time, some Democrats are again calling for tighter gun control in the wake of this tragedy.
Griff Jenkins is live in Washington, D.C. with how our nation's leaders are responding. Griff.
Good morning, Jillian. Rob, after the president learned of the tragic shooting, he phoned Florida's governor. Then he took to Twitter to offer condolences and prayers to the families of the victim, adding no child, teacher, or anyone else should ever feel unsafe in an American school. And the First Lady Melania responding as well on Twitter, saying, "My heart is heavy over the school shooting in Florida, keeping all affected in my thoughts and prayers." But as the tragic news hit Capitol Hill, the conversation turned to calls for gun control for some. Democrat Senator Chris Murphy blaming inaction.
This happens nowhere else other than the United States of America. It only happens here not because of coincidence, not because of bad luck, but as a consequence of our inaction. We are responsible.
And House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi renewing her calls for action, saying Congress has a moral responsibility to take common sense action to prevent the daily tragedy of gun violence in communities across America. Enough is enough, and at least a half a dozen other Democrat lawmakers joining her call. But Governor Rick Scott says now is not the time to talk gun control.
There's a time to continue to have these conversations about how through law enforcement, how through mental illness funding, that we make sure people are safe.
And Florida Senator Marco Rubio says it's too early.
Who this person is, what motivated them, how did they get a hold of the weapon that they used for this attack. I think it's important to know all of that before you jump to conclusions that there's some law that we could have passed that could have prevented it. And there may be, but shouldn't we at least know the facts?
Lawmakers are back on the Hill today on immigration, guys, but this debate is almost sure to continue as the day unfolds. Rob, Jillian?
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Griff, thank you.
All right, 8 minutes after the hour now, an expelled student wearing a gas mask and carrying an AR-15 and smoke grenades went on this deadly rampage inside of this Florida school. Why did he do it? Our next guest takes us inside the mind of a killer.
And social media lighting up across the country with support for the Florida community. How lawmakers and celebrities are reacting. Welcome back. We have breaking developments overnight in the Florida school shooting massacre. The FBI searching a home in a mobile park connected to the 19-year-old who is accused of killing at least 17 people.
That's right. Todd Pyro is live right outside of that school in Parkland, Florida, with new information this morning. Hey, Todd.
Hey, Rob. Hey, Jillian. Good morning to you. With each passing hour, we continue to learn brand new information about this killer as the investigation is over multiple scenes right now, including behind me right here in this community just north of Fort Lauderdale. That is a quiet, peaceful, beautiful community. The other scene right now that police are looking at pretty handily is overnight, the massive police presence at a mobile home park. That's about 30 minutes away from here, with sources saying it is in connection with the shooting. A neighbor in the area telling police, or saying police told him it was some kind of explosive at one of the homes. All this as a picture of a killer becomes clearer.
He was like shy, like with his lunch bag, but like he wouldn't talk a lot.
What was your take on it?
I mean, he was like that weird kid at school that you see, like walk around in school.
Described as a loner?
Yeah, like a loner.
Here's the very latest that we have been able to learn about the shooter, 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz. His adoptive mother died this past November, and he was living with a friend's family. Cruz was expelled from school for disciplinary reasons, and at one point was even banned from having a backpack for security concerns. One student said it was for fighting with his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend, and that Cruz had been abusive to that girl. That's the reason for the expulsion. On social media, Cruz is seen with pictures of guns and knives, bragging about shooting animals. The Broward County Sheriff calling the post very disturbing. And many people described him as being obsessed with guns. Words like sketchy, weird, off, strange, troubled, and super stressed out all the time, used by multiple students to describe the killer. One student even told local media that, quote, everyone predicted this shooting. Now, the FBI is asking for pictures and videos from the scene, from inside, from outside, so they can piece together a better picture of what is going on. But Rob and Jillian, the question still remains, if we knew this much about this individual and his predilection for such violence, how did this happen in the first place?
Yes.
We're all wondering.
All right, Todd, we'll analyze that a lot more in the coming days, I'm sure. Thank you so much. Law enforcement now examining the profile of the shooter, trying to figure out what pushed this young man to this point, and how should parents talk about what has just happened with their kids.
Here now with a closer look inside the mind of an accused killer is certified psychiatrist Dr. Dominic Sportelli. Thank you for joining us this morning. Now, look, you just heard Todd Pyro say what we've heard a lot of kids over the last, 16 hours say is everyone predicted this from this kid. So my question to you is, it's one thing to recognize mental health issues in someone, but it's another thing, in my opinion, tell me if I'm wrong, to be able to get to them and reach them to a point where you can help. How do you help someone in which you recognize these symptoms?
Yeah, completely agree. Rob and Jillian, thank you so much for having me. I think this is such an important topic. This is absolutely horrific. First and foremost, my thoughts and prayers go out to the family of this horrible, horrible tragedy. As behavioral health providers, as a behavioral health specialist, I look to try and understand the mind of someone like this in order to prevent this from happening in the future. Because the more we can understand about his motivation, the more we can use to prevent this from happening. What we clearly see in this kid, 19-year-old man, was that he was sociopathic. There's no question about it. He had no empathy. He was bullied as a child. He used anger and control physically to have this sense of empowerment and entitlement. We see that in his history. So we have a sense of sociopathy, we have a sense of narcissistic traits, the sense of entitlement. But the big question is, what did we see? Now, in most cases, when you look at prevention, most mass shooters will tell somebody. Now, in this case, he verbalized this on social media. We saw this. He specifically said things, loosely quoted, I'm going to kill a ton of people.
But obviously no one was able to reach him to the point where they could stop this.
Correct. Now, here's the problem with people like this. They're usually very disengaged. They usually retract from society somewhat. They are, quotes, loners. They're not loners because they want to be loners. They're loners because they can't fit in. There's an enormous amount of frustration with these individuals, and they have a sense of anger and irritability, and they have this sense of revenge because of the way they've been treated growing up, and they somehow think that by acting this way, they're going to get this notoriety and power and empowerment. Because in forensic psychiatry, we have a saying, and it states, infamy is better than insignificance. Insignificance is how this person felt. They needed to display this power. So when we see all of these red flags, right? Someone that has sociopathic tendencies, someone that was kicked out of school several occasions, someone that was involved in violence and bullying, someone that is verbalizing these things on social media, we need to find a way to reach them.
Is there, and I don't know what a good answer to this would be, but it certainly seems like as a population, we're just getting sicker mentally. Do you see that? Do you think people in this country are becoming, do we have more of a problem with mental health than we did?
Well, I hate to say it, Rob, but it almost seems to be a normalized phenomenon. And unfortunately, what we see in these cases when we look at mass shooters, it is a copycat phenomenon. We know that absolutely for sure. It's a copycat phenomenon, and it's this desire for empowerment, notoriety, and power over people that they feel weak against. Right? So you're right. There's a normalizing behavior, but it's a copycat phenomenon, and that's why we're seeing more and more.
We've got to run. Yes, no. Parents should be able to feel comfortable talking to their kids about this
Parents
morning.
need to talk to their kids about this. My quick points are, if the child is under 8 years old, we say, you know what, leave them out of it. They can't process it. Right. If it's your teens and preteens, what you need to do is talk to them. Make sure you control your emotions first, because how you react is how those kids are going to react. Right.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. We appreciate it. It is 18 minutes after the hour. Our other top story this morning, an immigration deal coming down to the wire.
Yeah, we're going to move to politics. Can Republicans maneuver around some resistance from the left? And there was somewhat of a deal coming in. Why our next guest says it might not be a good one that'll get through. We'll talk about that coming up. All right, welcome back. It is make or break on DACA this week as the Senate finally comes to a bipartisan agreement after days of what appear to be some stall tactics by Democrats. A vote could happen as soon as today, but will a moderate bill pass in this climate? Joining me now is contributor at The Hill and author of the new book, How Do I Tax Thee?, Kristen Tate. Kristen, thanks so much for coming in this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So this is a moderate bill, and it's not a moderate issue, really. It's swung out both ways really hard. Does this bill just initially have a shot?
It's unlikely to get the 60 votes it would need to pass in the Senate. Even if every Democrat voted for this bill, it would need 11 votes from Republicans. But the conservative wing of the GOP and the liberal wing of the Democratic Party are unlikely to support it because both sides don't think it goes far enough. The White House is also expected to lobby pretty heavily against the bill. Trump has been very clear that any bill he supports needs to include 4 pillars, which includes border security funding, including funding for the immediate construction of a border wall, the end to the diversity lottery, an end to chain migration, and a complete overhaul of the immigration system. This bill does not fulfill all 4 of those pillars.
It does. It's pretty good, though, for I would think for the White House, because I do think that the most important thing that they want out of this is the wall. I mean, he campaigned on the wall. Now, he got into chain migration and the visa lottery after some terror attacks, including the one in New York City. But he would get the wall, but he doesn't get all the money right away.
Exactly. It will take 10 years for this money to disperse. He's been very clear that money would need to be dispersed immediately. And I do not think Trump is going to back down from this. Immigration was his biggest issue on the campaign trail. And if he goes for any kind of moderate bill or any bill that does not fulfill his 4 pillars, it will be perceived as amnesty by his supporters. It could hurt Republicans in the midterm elections. So the political consequences could be pretty significant.
But he's already Mr. Amnesty. I mean, he's doubled the number of DACA recipients he wants to let in and legalize in this country to 1.8 million. So he doesn't have an issue with, I think, taking somewhat of a liberal stance on immigration. I think he's shown that he'll go that way if he can get his wall.
Sure. I mean, he's been very clear. No one wants to deport the Dreamers. I mean, that is not the issue. There's broad support for keeping the Dreamers here. But you cannot give amnesty to 2 million people and do nothing to fix the underlying problems with the immigration system. If we just do some sort of Band-Aid solution where we don't fix the underlying problems, in a couple years from now, we could have millions of more Dreamers. What do we do then? Do this all over again and give another amnesty bill?
Right. Okay. So you've got 25 million over 10 years. It doesn't give the immediate funding.
Sure.
It misses on a couple of other things. It's different from the Grassley plan, which the president has said he likes better. In what ways?
Well, the Grassley plan does acknowledge all 4 pillars that Trump, again, has been very clear about, but that bill is also unlikely to get the votes it would need to pass. So it's unclear what's going to happen on this issue. It's a critical issue. It's an issue that most Americans feel very passionately about. But unfortunately, we can't seem to come to an agreement because both sides are unwilling to budge, and President Trump has been very clear from the beginning what he needs in order to make this happen.
Okay, so it's the Common Sense Caucus, and it's what, 8 Republicans, 8 Democrats, and an independent. So it's a lot of people in that one. We'll see if that has a chance. But you say no. All right, Kristen, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
All right. Jillian, over to you.
It is 25 minutes after the hour. Disturbing new details about the suspected shooter's troubled past. What he was like as a student. His former math teacher, who was inside when the shooting happened, joins us live next. Investigators looking for answers as his social media footprint reveals a sick obsession with guns. We are live outside the sheriff's office, where he has been locked up for the last 12 hours.
With a Fox News alert, the teenager suspected of murdering 17 people inside of his former high school in custody this morning.
We continue our live team coverage now outside the Broward County Sheriff's Office with Rebecca Vargas of our affiliate WSBN.
And Rebecca, we understand the suspect's still there. What can you tell us about exactly what's happening right now?
Yeah. Good morning. Actually, just moments ago, that suspect, 19-year-old Nikolas Cruz, was placed into a deputy cruiser and was being transported to the county jail just a couple of miles away. But he has been here overnight. So we're talking an extensive interrogation of this suspect, talking about 12 hours of interrogation. Let's take you to video that we have for you yesterday of this whole scenario when Nikolas Cruz was taken into custody. You can see he was taken into custody. He was then placed on a fire rescue gurney. He was taken to the hospital for a short time, about 45 minutes, to be checked out. He was then brought to the Broward County Sheriff's headquarters to be interrogated by homicide detectives with the Broward County Sheriff's Office, as well as the FBI. These two agencies are working together on this tragic shooting. They interrogated him, interviewed him for hours, looking for a possible motive. They're looking at the days and the hours that led up to this shooting. The sheriff has also told us they have looked at his social media posts, at his Facebook, at his Instagram pages, and what they can say so far that they've seen, it's nothing short of disturbing. Photos of guns and of different things that are violent on his social media posts. Those have since been deleted, but that's what authorities are looking at. Again, he was interrogated here, interviewed for more than 12 hours, and just in the last few minutes was transported to the Broward County Jail, where he will be booked. We will bring you that information as we get it. For now, that is the latest here in Fort Lauderdale. I'm Rebecca Vargas.
Rebecca, thank you.
All right, our next guest, a math teacher, taught the suspect in his math class last year and remembers the school identifying him as a potential threat.
Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school math teacher Jim Gard joins us now by phone with more. Jim, first of all, we are sorry about what happened at your school yesterday. I know it is a very emotional time. Can you tell us what this suspect was like in your class?
Well, I had him about in the 2016-17 year. He was only with me, I believe, the first semester or so. He was quiet in class. You know, that's what I can really remember from him. You know, there was nothing outstanding either way. Like I say, he was relatively quiet. He really wasn't a problem in my class. And that was really about it. There was nothing, like I said, that would have made me, think of anything.
Yeah. Other students have explained that he was somewhat of a loner, and there are some disturbing things that have been said about him by students in this school that knew him and had seen him. It sounds like he kept to himself in your class. But there are people that said that if they would have imagined anybody would have done something like this, it would have been this student. You didn't get any indication of that as just kind of a troubled child?
Unfortunately not. I mean, he was, it wasn't like he was there every single day. I was trying to check through my emails, and see if I could check through any records or anything like that. But like I said, it was a year ago, say between August and December-ish of 2016. So that'd be the early 16-17 school year.
So a lot of the students said they weren't surprised when they heard his name, that it was him. Were you surprised yesterday when you heard who the alleged shooter was?
Was I surprised when I heard the alleged shooter? Who the alleged shooter? No. But not because it was Nick. I'm just, I hate to say it, this is my 36th year teaching, and this happens so often in the U.S. that nothing is surprising anymore, and that may be the worst thing of all.
It certainly is. That's just a terrible reality that we're all coming to grips with, is just how commonplace these kinds of shootings have become. Sir, let me ask you about Parkland, Florida. It's actually a community that I've visited before. Just tell us a little bit about your experience living there for people that don't know this South Florida neighborhood very well. What kind of people live there? What kind of community is it? What kind of school is this?
It's a beautiful area, nice community. The families, I've been at Douglas since 2008, and the kids are fantastic. They're wonderful kids, but I could say that about pretty much all my students since I started teaching in '82.
We're hearing a lot of stories of heroism coming out of the tragic events of yesterday, and one of the stories that we're hearing is about a football coach from your school who, as the story goes that we're hearing anyway, shielded some students when the shooting happened. Do you know this coach, and can you tell us about him?
Yeah, I just heard about it just now. I had no idea, so I don't really have very many details, but I think it was Aaron, and he was a football coach there. He actually went to Douglas. Football player there, coach at Douglas, and he's fantastic. He's just a fantastic person. I have no idea what his condition is, but he's a great guy. I mean, I knew him, very well since 2008. So he's just a fantastic guy, and that will not be surprising at all.
Yeah, it's a true hero there, absolutely. Were you in school yesterday when this all happened? Were you there in class?
Oh yeah. My building is just like 50 yards away from where the shooting actually happened. Except
what was the response? What did you hear? Tell us how it all went down.
A little surrealistic initially because about 2:20 the fire alarm went off, and which I told the kids, wait, hold on for a second. We just had a fire drill at 9:30 a.m. and I said, wait a minute, hang in there. It's kind of weird for the fire alarm to go off a second time. I thought maybe it's our culinary class, burning toast or something like that, which, can happen. And so I said, hang in there for a bit. We lined up at the door, gave him instructions on what to do, where to go. And then one of our administrators got on, who I've actually known him since he was in high school. And he said to evacuate. So all the kids were leaving, and about 90% of them were out, maybe more than that, almost, all of them were out. And then we heard a bunch of popping, and so I yelled, hey, get back in here. And then right on the PA, Winfred Porter, our admin, said code red, which means there's an active shooter on campus. There were about 6 kids or so, came back in my room. I looked up and down the hallway for about 10 or 12 seconds to see if anybody else was around that I could shuttle in, and there was nobody. So I closed the door, turned off the lights, and which is what we were trying to do literally 3 weeks ago during a teacher in service.
Okay. All right. Math teacher at the high school that was the subject of this horrible tragedy yesterday. Thank you so much, Jim Gard, for coming on this morning and talking to us and tell us the story. Appreciate it.
All right. You're welcome. Like I said, our administration and all, they were fantastic. So it's sad.
Absolutely. Our hearts are with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
The shooter wearing a gas mask, unloading an AR-15. His social media revealing an obsession with guns. So how did he fly under the radar, and how was he able to carry out such carnage?
Our next guest, a former NYPD lieutenant, says the school's security is to blame. Dr. Darren Porcher is here live.
In Investigators now pouring through disturbing posts, photos, social media accounts, trying to find out what motivated a teen to carry out the tragic Florida school shooting. So were there warning signs that were missed?
Here now to weigh in is former NYPD Lieutenant Dr. Darren Porcher. Dr. Porcher, thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Thanks for unfortunate circumstances.
Absolutely, it certainly is, and it's a rough day to be in this business, absolutely. Let's talk about what was missed here, because there are so many warning signs that we've seen when we hear from these other students at the school that talk about he had an affinity for guns, he had a thing about violence with animals, his mom had to call the police on him to keep him straight. I mean, it seems like there was a lot of warning signs here. Could this have been averted?
I believe so. One of the things, as you mentioned, his social media, I mean, there was a blueprint there that was horrific. He was someone that was reflective of, I want to say, a sociopath, and that this was this communications that he had both online and in the school were troubling, coupled with he exhibited this antisocial behavior amongst his peers. The school had placed a picture of him up, so to speak, to state that he was in no way, shape, or form allowed to come back into the school with a backpack. So when I look at the security of the school, there's two components. You have an external and internal component. The internal component, of course, deals with the housing of the school. However, the external component could have effectively eradicated this, I shouldn't say eradicated, but stop the threat moving forward. All he had to do was merely close the doors. That was it. Because this is something that started off initially outside. School doors are traditionally thick, wide doors. They're not screen doors. And by merely closing that door would have prevented this individual from coming in and creating further carnage.
A statement we've heard over and over and over again, especially in the last few hours, is if you see something, say something. I'm sorry if this seems insensitive for me to say it this way, but I'm almost at the point, and I know a lot of people are, where I'm having a hard time listening to that statement. Because, look, people knew about this guy's behavior, this alleged shooter's behavior. The school knew enough because he wasn't allowed in the school. The school expelled him. So why wasn't anybody able to stop this? Because obviously people knew. It frustrates me. It frustrates a lot of people. How do you stop it?
I blame the school. One of the things is every school falls under the auspices of a violence report, and what they do is they go out of their way to suppress the number of complaints or allegations they have in connection with violence. So oftentimes schools will minimize this, and I think that it's very important for the schools to take an effective role in the investigation to prevent these things from happening moving forward. Because if we get this information out to law enforcement or the proper authorities, when I say proper authorities, meaning security that you have on site, we can effectively put up a fortification and prevent these types of people from re-entering the school.
Right. So is there like a step missing, you think, then between school and law enforcement when a student like this is expelled, that someone else needs to be notified?
Absolutely. Generally what happens with schools, you have either someone that we refer to as a resource officer, which is basically a certified police officer, so to speak, or you have police officers that work in the school. The school officials and that component need to work together in a collaborative function and have an information exchange of intelligence to ensure that these types of